Thanks. Hey, everyone. My name is Svet Ganov. I work on the Android framework team. And I'll be talking about Android printing, how Android puts pixels on paper. I'll be giving the talk with Philip, my colleague. He's going to join us a bit later to talk about some more things. So you're probably already asking yourself, why printing matters in mobile? How is it important? People are using everything in the cloud. You don't need to put physical paper. It's outdated technology. Well, it turns out that the main reason you want to add this printing to your applications is because your users want it. So there are some studies that show that 95% of the consumers and 67% of the corporate users want to be able to print from mobile applications, which is a pretty strong signal that printing is useful even from mobile devices. Also, some developers have seen that incorporating printing into their app, they get better retention. They have higher probability of in-app purchases, and the engagement of the users is higher. These are all great examples, but I also want to share some of my personal experiences and why printing from mobile is important for me and how it helped me. For example, I'm always late for the airport, always in the last minute, always running. So what I usually do is I log in on my device, I check in, I print my boarding pass, I run to the airport, because if my phone dies when I'm checking in, I have to go in line again, and I'm going to miss my plane. So it's really, really useful to be able to print from mobile for me. Another use case that's really important for me was I was recently refinancing my house, and my broker is always sending me one more thing to sign. It's very important. It has to be done now. And of course, it's in the worst time when you don't have a computer next to you. But we have printers all over campus, so I'm able to literally take my phone out, print to the closest printer, sign the paperwork, take a photo, and send it. So it was very, very useful. And speaking about corporate environments, corporate printers, more and more companies have the policy of bringing your own device. And so in a corporate environment, printing is definitely much more important than in your personal everyday life. So adding printing to your application is definitely adding more value to the user, especially in corporate environments. So if you remember, printing on desktop, it's really, really frustrating to set it up working the first time. You need to download the right driver from the right manufacturers. It should be for the right model. And if you want to do it quickly, it could be really frustrating experience. We just didn't want it. We wanted to not make the same mistakes, if you want to say that, but try something else instead in mobile. And we are working with the printing industry to come up with a standard that will work with printers from all manufacturers. So all big manufacturers are members of the MOPRIA Alliance. You can see all the familiar names that probably you have printer at home from one of these manufacturers. So they came to us and they said, hey, we want to work with you together to make printing much easier for the user, easier to set up, having a single piece of software that can talk to printers from every different manufacturer so the user doesn't have to worry about setting up their devices. We also have members from MOPRIA, so they'll join us for Q&A at the end, and you'll have an opportunity to touch base with them. So I'll be talking about the Android print APIs, but before diving into that, I want to give you a very, very brief view of the Android print architecture. So in mobile, the question of what printers do you have doesn't really make much sense. The real question is, how many printers can you find in my current context, in my current environment? So the way Android printing works is that you have applications that want to print, which is what you guys work on, that use the print API. You have print services, so these are the drivers, if you want to think of them as drivers. So this is what our friends from MOPRIA are working on. And you have the system, which is the print manager. That's the main centralized brain that connects all the dots. And you have the print spooler. The print spooler is just the part that shows the UI, shows notifications, shows you the current print jobs, and manages the current print jobs. So that's a high-level architecture of Android. Without going into much details, I'll go straight to the APIs. The main thing I want to show is how easy it is to print from your app. So how do you print from an application? The first thing you need to do is to get a hold of the print manager. So that's the entry point for the print framework. It's very similar to how you get the package manager, activity manager. It's a very standard way of getting an Android standard service. Once you get the print manager, all you have to do is call the print method. You pass the print job name, and you pass a print document adapter. So the print document adapter is the important part here. So that's the piece of software that generates PDF based on what user selected in the UI, such that it can produce the printed content. So before I go into the details how you write the print document adapter, I want to briefly explain what's the philosophy of printing on Android. So when you print, the application calls into the system and says, hey, I want to print. And this is where a collaborative process starts between the system and the application to generate the content based on the user constraints. So what I mean by that is, for example, user changes the paper size. So if the paper size is different, maybe your application wants to do a layout of 2 columns instead of 1 column because you have more space. Basically, we want to propagate all the constraints, everything the user has selected, to the application, so the application is in the best position to lay out the content the right way and render it. Another thing we changed was how we separated layout from rendering. So layout is figuring out how many pages you're going to have, how the content's going to be placed on the pages, and rendering is actually producing the pixels from the layout. The reason we did this, for example, is if you have a 1,000-page document, you really need to lay out the whole content to know how many pages you have and what is on page 7. But if the user is looking at page 6 and 7 in the print preview, you don't want to render 1,000 pages because all you care is rendering the 2 pages that the user can see. So this is why we have 2 separate concepts of performing layout and rendering. So this is how the layout callback looks on print document adapter. So it provides you the print attributes, which is what the user has selected in the UI, and gives you a callback to tell us when you're ready. It's completely synchronous. In this API, you can take any amount of work, but the shorter it takes, the better, because this literally affects the UX. And once you're ready, you can call back and say, hey, I'm done, I'm finished. So here is the information about the document. It has this many pages, and it's this type. You can also say, hey, I failed because of this reason, and the reason string goes into the UI, so the user knows what happened. And also another callback another callback is on canceled. So the canceled is, if you notice, the on layout method takes a cancellation signal. And this is a way for the system to nicely tell you, hey, please stop what you're doing because things changed and what you're doing is irrelevant. So for example, if the user selects, say, page size A4, and you start doing a layout, and the user changes in the meantime the page size again, we're literally going to ask you, hey, please stop what you're doing because there is different page size and you have to do the work again. So the more responsive you are, the better the user experience is. So very similar to layout, writing is very similar. It's very similar, work in a very similar way. So we're telling you, hey, please render these pages, and we give you a page range. And we provide you a destination. So write these pages in PDF format to this file descriptor. Once you're ready, you get a callback, and you can use the callback to tell us, hey, I'm finished, and these are the pages that I've written. Or you can say, I failed because of this reason. We show this in the UI. Or you can say, I was canceled. So now at this point, you're probably already saying, wow, this is super complicated. I don't want to deal with all these callbacks. This is just, all I want to do is print a photo. It should be very simple, very easy. I don't need to deal with all this complicated machinery. And also, you also think, hey, I don't know anything about PDF. I'm actually the same. I know almost nothing. And I want to be able to generate PDF content. I don't want to learn a PDF rendering library in order to print very simple things. And we got you covered. So we have a very simple class that allows you to generate PDF from using standard Android rendering commands. So we realized that you probably already know how to put pixels on the screen. And if you know how to use the Android rendering APIs, you can use the same approach to generate PDF content. And the PDF document class is the helper that does that. And the way it works is you create a new PDF document. You create a page specification, and you start the page. Once you have the page, this is where the interesting part is. You can literally get the canvas of the page, and you can render anything you like. So in this case, I'm just getting a content view, which is just some view, and asking the view to draw itself on the canvas. And once you finish the rendering, you're saying, hey, finish the page and write the document to this stream, and that's it. You just generated PDF representation of whatever rendering commands you issued. So it's pretty easy. Another very useful facility we have is being able to print bitmaps. For example, you have a photo. All you want to do is put this photo to this printer in few lines of code. And the way to do this is using the print helper from the support library, which is dedicated for printing bitmaps in a backwards compatible fashion. And the way it works, you create a print helper. You can specify some optional arguments. For example, here we're saying, hey, we want to print in color, we want to print in landscape, and we want to scale the content in a certain way. And once you do these small tweaks, now you can literally call the print method and pass a URI to the bitmap, and magic, it just works. So the print helper takes care of all the complicated machinery, doing all these callbacks, doing layout, doing writing, and everything is done for you for free. Another very useful facility for printing is being able to print HTML. Because, for example, you want to format text in a certain way, and you want to print it. Very easy way to format text is HTML. Almost everybody knows how to use HTML. And what you can do is you can format your text in HTML, load it in a web view. That's pretty standard. I'm sure that most of you know how to do this. And once you do this, WebView has a method which says, hey, create print document adapter. And this print document adapter is the thing that you pass to the print framework. So once you get the print document adapter from the WebView, you can literally pass it to the print manager's print method. It will just work. It will handle the layout, the rendering, and it will do all the cleanup. It will do everything for you. It's very easy. So before I turn the microphone to Philip, I just want to rehash that. You can see that we have very flexible APIs, which are very useful for very sophisticated apps where you want to control your layout and rendering very well. For example, if you're an advanced text editor, you probably want to implement the print document adapter yourself because you have full control of how the layout's going to happen and what the output's going to be. But if you're an app developer that just wants to put some pixels on the screen, you want to print a photo, or you want to print some formatted text, or you want to render something instead of the screen to render this to a PDF, you can use all the helper classes that I was showing you. So you can see that there is an approach for printing for everyone. And we kind of believe that using the API with the callbacks, it's only for very sophisticated use cases. So with that, I'll turn over to Philip. He's going to be talking more about UX and how the platform evolved over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Svet. So you saw how easy it is. I want to show you how the user interacts with the print framework. Before KitKat, the only way you could print was the app sends out an intent with some data, and the print manufacturers might provide an app that receives this intent and then renders the data onto the paper. The problem with that was that the print manufacturer's app didn't know anything about the content beside the actual data. And the result was sometimes good, but not always. So with KitKat, we introduced a collaborative approach where the app the printer and the user interact to create the print. So in my example here, you can see the UI of KitKat, and the printer provided its properties. For example, what kind of paper size it supports. In my case, letter, and I guess it might support, I don't know, legal too. The user can then select which of the available option it wants, and then the app renders the result onto the paper. With Lollipop, we added the preview, which of course is very useful to actually see what you're going to print before you actually put it in the physical world. And also allows you very easy to select which pages you don't want to print, because you might, in my case, 5 pages might be too much. I might want to print page 3. With Marshmallow, there was no big changes. We added one more capability, so you can say which duplex mode you want to say, but there was no major changes. In general, there are no big changes between KitKat all the way to N for app developers. So if you write KitKat capable code, it will work all the way to N. So for N, we realized that the actual printing workflow is quite nice now, and it works well. But what doesn't work very well now is the setup process of your printer. So in my example, I set up a simple network, as everybody of you has at home, and put one Canon printer onto this network, as I guess it's a common use case. Can you roll the video? OK, so I have my browser open here, and I want to print this page. So I select Print. And the print dialog pops up and shows me a preview, and it says select printer. OK, I go ahead and select a printer. And I can save this PDF, but my printer doesn't show up yet, so I guess I have to add it. So I press Add Printer. And it tells me, yeah, you might want to install software from Canon, which sounds reasonable because my printer's made by Canon. So I click on this icon. Then goes me to the Play Store, and I can install the Canon Print Service, which is nice and fast on Android N because of our improvements in the install path. Everything is done. Now I'll go back to the print framework. And you can see that I installed my printer, and you can see in the background it actually found my printer. So wonderful. So let's go ahead and select my printer in the background. So now I select my printer, and my print button is there. So I go ahead and print. This warning will only show up the very first time you print, so it won't interrupt further print process. So everything seems to be fine, so let's check if printing is running. So printing is running, so I don't wait until it prints out. It takes too long, but this is basically how the user interacts with the printing the very first time. Can you close the video? Thank you. Once the printer is set up in a certain environment, you don't have to go through the whole process again. You just go say print and press the print button. So this is only for the very first time you set up printing, or if you go to a friend and want to print on their printer, and you might require additional software. So the idea was to make it very simple for you to discover which software you need without having to go to the Play Store and searching for something or reading some documentation. So I hope we've all convinced you to add printing to your app, or maybe you already added printing to your app and you want to improve it. Over the years, we found certain issues which come up frequently, and I want to go over 4 of them and comment on them. How do we suggest to handle them? First, when you print, you can actually suggest what kind of attributes the printer is going to have. So in my case, I have a portrait picture of my Android statuette here. And it would be nice if, by default, the paper would be oriented in portrait instead of landscape. So if you don't suggest anything, it might turn up to be, by default, in landscape. And the user has to go to settings and change it, and that takes time away from the user to going back into your app. So I would recommend to suggest as many of these default attributes as possible: paper size, color mode. And this will make the print experience as smooth as possible for the user. Secondly, Svet talked about the onLayout and onWrite call. And there's actually a magic return code from the onLayout call where you can say, I don't know how many pages the document has. which allows you to return from the onLayout call basically immediately. You can do that, and if you do that, you get the UI on the left. It's basically a spinning spinner. And it's not a good UI because nothing seems to be happening for like 5 seconds for the user. If you return the number of pages, you get the other UI on the left side, the paper. You can say in my case 17 pages. And the user at least sees that something is going on. So we highly suggest to implement a layout call appropriately and return it. But in the case where your layout call would be as slow as the write call, it doesn't make sense to do it work twice. And in this case, we recommend to return unknown pages. Third, this is a clarification of the API. So let's walk through the normal print process. So you issue the print command, and the print preview opens. And then, for example, the user resizes the application with multi-window mode or rotates the screen. So what happens in a common case is that they go through an on-destroy, on-create cycle. And you could even say if you rotate the screen, the application after the rotation might look very different than the original application. So let's go destroy, on-create. So on-create, you have to decide, does printing still make sense in this situation? In this case, you don't do anything. If it does make sense, you don't do anything. If it does make sense, you actually have to restart the printing process by calling print again. The last thing I want to mention is more a plea from my side. If you render PDFs, please provide valid PDFs. Provide valid PDFs that match the attributes and that match the metadata you sent. If you don't do this, it might render fine on the print preview screen, but it might not render fine inside of a printer. And you might end up with results which confuse the user. We saw many cases where this didn't work very well. So it would be nice if you take care of that. Thanks for coming to this talk. I put our documentation or our web page on the slides and also our partners' web page. So please look at them, and I hope it helps you with your development. So I would like to invite Svet back on stage. And also, I'm very happy that our partners from Xerox, HP, and Canon, which are all part of the Mopre Alliance, would come on stage. And you can ask questions. The microphone is over there.
Okay, thanks. My name is Ming Gao. I work for Hewlett-Packard. Focus on mobile printing, start with the mobile apps, and then work on KitKat with Svet, enabling that. Now working with them through the mobile.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Rice. I work for Xerox. I'm the development manager for our mobile and cloud print offerings. Really excited about the improvements coming out in N today and working with Google further.
I am Peter Poirier. I'm the manager for the mobile app development from Canon. I work out of the Seattle area. And I'm also really happy to be working with Svet and Zach and Philip on the Google printing improvements for N, which are looking really great.
I'm Svet. I work on the Android framework team. I was the initial engineer working on printing, and now Philip's taking care of that.
Okay, so are there any questions? No questions? Yeah. Oh yeah, over there, one person. Wonderful.
Are there going to be any future plans within the framework to streamline that process? I mean, you showed how you have to go to the Play Store and download these plugins and processes. Is that ever going to be baked into the Android framework so that that just happens transparently in the background, the user doesn't have to worry about it?
I'm not sure it's a good idea to install software for the user without the user knowing. But of course, we're always working to improve the user experience. So if you have suggestions, write on the Spaces page, or we are happy to improve it. Because we want to use it to print. We want the user to get into your app as quickly as possible back. So.
That's a good question. That's actually a very good question. So we're actually doing kind of both way. For the in-OS discovery, it's more like a long tail. So you have some printer which is kind of special. It can pick it up with the right driver, right? But we also, as a Mopre, is trying to preload the Mopre plugin on all these major phones. So we start with Huawei. I think Amazon has our product. So whenever you have a phone, most likely the Mopre plugin will be preloaded. so that I avoid the additional step to install it. So we do both. Yeah, good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just chime in real quick? Just to chime in real quick related to that. So in N, we actually ship in a printer discovery component that is part of the platform that is updatable separately if we need to. It's actually looking the local network to find printers for certain manufacturers and suggest the right software, which is how, if you remember Philip's demo, it recommended the Canon print plugin to software. I agree that you still have to go to a couple of hoops to click the install button, but it's something we definitely want to improve more.
Hello, my questions concern the thermal printer support in the platform. The support for desk jets or big printers are quite okay, quite easy to use, and so on. But do you have anything in the roadmap to support the small printers like stores when you are printing a receipt? It's completely different how the framework should work to this, and I don't see. I use it already, but with proprietary protocols to print. I wonder if there is any plan to incorporate this in the framework so that we can use the same architecture and platform to print in these thermal printers.
Can you guys?
Okay. So actually a very good question. Again, it's really to the vendor who provide the thermal printer to write the plugin. And then I think what may be additional is the paper size. Right? So it's a special paper, but the architecture accommodates all that. That's the beauty of the Android architecture.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that. I mean, one of the things the Moprint Alliance is trying to do is standardize any printer company, even receipt printers. They could join the alliance, implement our same standards, and they'd work with our technology that we're releasing.
But does Xerox, HP, or Canon, do you have these printers for stores and things like this? As far as I know, you don't have it, right? Any plans?
So actually, we'll be really happy we the framework team, the Android team, we'll be really happy to work with you guys to come to see what's missing in the APIs. Because I can see these printers are different. You have a role, and then it's completely different. But probably the enhancement to the APIs are not that huge we need to make. But we're not domain experts. We need your help. Please get in touch with us. Help us help you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
My question is, what about support for before API 19? Should we just use the old cloud print, or? Well,
I can answer that before API 19, where before.
I mean,
KitKat.
it's not the same. It's not the same API. So.
Yeah, before, I mean, the APIs were introduced in KitKat. So if you want to add printing to your app for backwards compatibility, you unfortunately have to fall back to the old approach. You just check the API level of device you're running in,
Okay.
and then fall back to the throw over the wall approach where you just use the share intent. Unfortunately, that's the only way. We looked into backporting the print framework, but it's not feasible to all devices.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Does this framework extend to Chrome OS as well? And are you writing Chrome apps as these drivers?
I can answer that. So we're working with them, and it's not all completely finalized what we're going to do. But we are, of course, committed to bringing printing to Chrome OS and as good as possible, and also bringing Android on Chrome OS apps. They should print too, and we're going to make this work, of course.
Thanks.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit. So Chrome actually has print APIs. They're not the same as are in Android, but they are available, and they have a similar life cycle where the user selects file print, you get an event, you can then respond to that with the printers that your Chrome app supports, and you can run discovery and do whatever you need to do there. It could be standardized using the same things that we're using here. And then beyond that is getting capabilities, accepting the print content, and then tracking status. So all those APIs and hooks are there for a Chrome app that you can build that can tie into the native file print path of Chrome.
Yeah, but some of the enterprises, their printers are not cloud ready, and they want to print directly through the driver instead of going through Google Cloud Print. So for those use cases, it will be useful to have a Chrome app as a, your driver as a Chrome app.
Absolutely, and in fact, that's kind of what I was referring to. The APIs I'm talking about, they don't leverage the GCP path, so you can do a direct print and not go through Google Cloud Print infrastructure using those APIs that Chrome provided. I think they were released last year sometime. So, but they are there, and I guess if you have questions after, I can talk more about that.
Actually, there's a name for that API. I think they just released last year. It's called Printer Provider API. You can actually write a Chrome app, interact with that for printing. But there's more coming, I suppose, right, Shuet? Because we just heard the announcement. I think that probably that's what you alluded to yesterday, that now that they have a plan to run all Android apps on Chrome. I don't know how that works, but something is coming.
Yeah, so I don't know if the plugin, if the plugin concept was totally clear. What Philip had shown was with a Canon plugin being installed. So each vendor can write a plugin. So it's up to the printer companies to provide that. And then with that in place, you don't need the GCP path. You can print through these plugins, and it will translate to what the printer needs. And there's also a Mopria plugin, which is more universal. So any printer from any vendor that supports the Mopria print architecture will work with the same plugin.
Okay.
So that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
This is perhaps out of the scope of the current talk, but are there any plans for 3D printing support?
Well, in the typical, style of Google answering this question is, we'll look into it. But yeah, we don't talk about future plans, honestly. Yeah, sorry.
How can make a screen print without save as image?
So you want to print out what you have on the screen without saving it anywhere?
Yeah, I would like to print out that screen, not save as image.
Well, you can, of course, you can take a screenshot and then in Photos select screenshot and then print. Of course, it gets temporarily stored on your device. If that is too security sensitive, yeah, not directly.
You've done some study and you said 95% of the people want to use this API, right? Have you done any study like in the retail space, what use case printing would be like useful?
So maybe before I answer that question, I think I would like to just maybe summarize what we have discussed today. I think you are the app developers. I think the talk really is one of the things we want to emphasize is when you write an app that prints, most likely the printer that you have will be supported. That's the key thing, right? To your question in terms of the mobile printing and the use case, I think we still see a lot of photo printing. A big part of it is photo printing. As Android move to work, productivity focus, I think you will have more document. As you go to enterprise, there's more enterprise-related information that can be printed. We see lots of that.
Just to chime in, for printing, what is important, I mean, it's like any feature is, what is the value I'm getting for adding this feature? And the other is, what's the price I need to pay in terms of how long it's going to take me to develop it? So we tried really hard to make the entry point, like developing the feature, easier. So if you use the helpers to print bitmap or HTML, it's pretty easy. But in case you need some other helpers, we'll be happy to provide that to make the entry point easier. Because I think with enterprise becoming more and more important for mobile devices, I think printing will definitely, but that's my personal feeling is that it will get more and more used in the future. So,
taking your boarding pass example at the beginning to the logical conclusion, and given Android Wear 2.0 being more independent of the phone, is there plans to be able to do things like print boarding passes directly from your watch?
In theory, there is not. So I don't know whether the Clockwork team is going to turn the feature on. It's literally one feature. It's configuration when you flash your Android device. I don't see a reason not to, honestly. There is nothing preventing them from doing that, in a sense that the device has Wi-Fi. It runs the whole stack. So it's that's actually going to be magical. This will be magical. You just print from your watch. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to be on the Spaces page for the next 2 or 3 hours. So if you have questions, just post it there and we can discuss it there. Yeah. Thank you.